The failed terror mission. A thunderous roar shook downtown as pedestrians scattered in every direction, all except one giggling child. Voxis, interdimensional dragon and junior associate of the Galactic Intimidation Corps, was having a terrible day. His obsidian scales itched constantly, his terror quota was 26% below target, and Earth's strange gravity made his left wing cramp something fierce. He folded his massive leathery wings against his dark body and glared at the performance review floating before his snout. Third consecutive quarter of substandard fear collection, he read aloud, the words glowing in accusatory red. Subject to probationary status and potential reassignment to Flora Intimidation Division, Sector 9. Voxis snorted, sending twin jets of sulfurous smoke spiraling into the air. Flora Intimidation. He'd rather eat his own tail than spend eternity trying to terrify ferns and mushrooms. His predecessor had been demoted after failing to meet quotas, and rumor had it the poor beast had gone completely mad, reduced to shrieking at cacti on some desolate asteroid. He crushed the review in one massive claw, his razor-sharp talons shredding the interdimensional document into particles of light that dissolved into nothingness. The problem, he decided, wasn't him, it was the assignment. Earth had grown too cynical. These humans were desensitized by their own apocalyptic entertainment, spending their leisure time watching horror films and playing games where dragons were just another boss to defeat for extra points. How was a respectable fear harvester supposed to compete with that? With an irritated flick of his tail, Voxis activated his cloaking field and launched himself into the air. His form became transparent, then invisible to human eyes as he soared above the city of Meadowvale. From this height, the buildings looked like children's toys, the humans like scurrying ants. He needed a new strategy. His supervisor, the dreaded Gensch, had given him one Earth week to improve his numbers or face demotion. Extending his awareness, Voxis scanned the city for potential targets. The GIC handbook was clear. Children ages 4 to 11 provided maximum yield with minimal resistance. He'd been focusing too much on adults lately, time to get back to basics. His sensory organs tingled as he detected a promising location, Meadowvale Elementary School. Perfect. A playground full of small humans just waiting to be terrified. He'd hit his quota by lunchtime. The dragon descended, positioning himself on the school roof. With perfect timing, the bell rang and children poured out into the playground. Voxis licked his lips with his forked tongue. This was going to be easy. He dropped his cloaking field and unleashed his most blood-curdling roar, one that had once caused an entire stadium of warriors on planet Bruskin to soil their battle armor simultaneously. The sound shattered several windows and set off car alarms throughout the neighborhood. The effect was gratifying. Children screamed, teachers fainted, parents who had been dropping off late arrivals fled to their vehicles. Voxis extended his collection apparatus and began to feed, watching his quota meter tick upward. But then he noticed something odd. One small human wasn't running. A tiny figure in a bright red shirt and blue pants stood in the middle of the playground, looking up at him with, was that a smile? An unlikely encounter. Voxis roared again, directly at the child. The boy's dark hair ruffled in the blast of dragon breath, but instead of cowering, he clapped his hands and laughed. Laughed. The dragon's collection apparatus sputtered to a halt. Nothing disrupted fear harvesting like laughter, it was like trying to collect water with a sieve. Voxis swooped down, landing with an earth-shaking thud just feet from the small human. Up close, he could see the child couldn't be more than 6 or 7 years old. He wore miniature versions of adult footwear that lit up with each step, and his red shirt bore some cartoonish image of a superhero. "Fear me, tiny human," Voxis commanded, baring teeth the size of steak knives. The boy giggled again. "You're funny. Do you breathe fire? Can I ride on your back?" This was unprecedented. In 823 years of fear collection across 13 galaxies, Voxis had never encountered a creature that didn't immediately surrender to terror in his presence. He felt strangely offended. "What is wrong with you?" he growled. "I am Voxis Doombringer, shadow walker, nightmare made flesh. Children cower before me. Adults lose bladder control at the mere mention of my name. The child rocked back and forth on his light-up shoes. I'm Tommy. I'm 6 3/4. You have really cool wings. Are you from space? Before Voxis could respond, the sound of approaching sirens penetrated his awareness. Human authorities, annoying, but not a real threat. Still, it would complicate his collection efforts. With a frustrated hiss, he activated his cloaking field and took to the air. Come back, the child called after him. I want to show you to my mom. Voxis circled high above as emergency vehicles surrounded the school. His quota meter had barely moved, still 25% below target. A negligible improvement, and all because of one fearless child. He had to solve this problem. If he couldn't scare one small human, how could he possibly meet his quota? As he flew back to his temporary lair, an abandoned warehouse at the edge of the city, he pulled up the GIC handbook on his forearm display. In Chapter 12, Resistant Subjects, he read, in rare cases where standard intimidation tactics fail, escalation protocol is authorized. Note, use of physical harm is strictly prohibited by Galactic Convention Section 28, Paragraph 6. Voxis snorted as if he would actually harm a child. The very suggestion was offensive. Dragons might feed on fear, but they weren't monsters. He landed on the warehouse roof and settled in for the night, his mind churning with plans for tomorrow. One way or another, he would make that child fear him. His career depended on it. The next morning, Voxis tracked the strange child to his home, a modest dwelling on Maple Street. He watched, invisible, as Tommy emerged wearing a different shirt, this one green with dinosaur patterns, but the same blue pants. The boy carried a colorful container that presumably held his midday sustenance. Voxis followed him to school, waiting for the perfect moment to try again. When Tommy separated from the adult female who had escorted him, his maternal unit, presumably, the dragon made his move. He materialized directly in front of the child, contorting his face into what the handbook described as, Expression 23, soul-freezing terror. He extended his claws, unfurled his wings to their full 30-foot span, and let his eyes glow with internal fire. Tommy's response was to drop his lunch container and applaud. You came back. I told Mom about you, but she didn't believe me. Can you do tricks? Voxis felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest, something that had nothing to do with his fear collection apparatus. The Dragon's Dilemma. For the first time in 8 centuries, Voxis found himself at a complete loss for words. This small human wanted him to perform tricks. The absurdity of it all made his scales tingle with an emotion he couldn't quite identify. I don't do tricks, he rumbled, trying to maintain his dignity. I am an agent of cosmic terror, not some carnival entertainer. Tommy picked up his dropped lunchbox, completely unfazed. My dad taught me not to lie. Are you really from space? Because that would be so cool. Despite himself, Voxis found his aggressive posture softening slightly. I am from many places. Dimensions beyond your comprehension, child. Dimensions? Tommy's eyes went wide with wonder, not fear. Like in my comic books? Do you fight bad guys? The dragon blinked his massive eyes. In a way, he supposed he did fight bad guys. Fear was, after all, a weapon against those who would harm others. But explaining the complex moral framework of the Galactic Intimidation Corps to a 6-year-old seemed challenging. It's complicated, Voxis said finally. Tommy nodded sagely, as if this made perfect sense. My mom says that about her job too. She works with numbers that make people sad. He looked around the empty playground, then back at the dragon. Are you lonely? You seem lonely. The question hit Voxis like a meteor to the chest. Lonely? He was a creature of shadow and nightmare, a harvester of primal emotions. He didn't get lonely. Except, When was the last time anyone had shown genuine interest in him rather than running away screaming? "I am not lonely," he said, but the words sounded hollow even to his own ears. Tommy sat down on a nearby bench, patting the space beside him. "You can sit with me if you want. I eat lunch alone sometimes too." The sight of this tiny human trying to comfort a being that could level city blocks was so incongruous that Voxis actually sat down, his massive form dwarfing the bench. His tail curled around unconsciously, like a cat seeking comfort. "Tell me about the dimensions," Tommy said, unwrapping what appeared to be a sandwich. "Is it scary where you're from?" Voxis considered this. "My home realm exists in perpetual twilight. The sky burns with cold fire, and the mountains reach into the void between stars. Most beings find it unsettling." "Wow," Tommy breathed. "It sounds beautiful." Beautiful? Voxis had never thought of his home that way. Impressive, yes. Terrifying, certainly. But beautiful? "You see things differently than most creatures," the dragon observed. Tommy shrugged. "Mom says I have an imagination. She says it'll get me in trouble someday, but I think it makes everything more interesting." He offered half his sandwich to Voxis. "Want some? It's peanut butter and jelly." The gesture was so simple, so innocent, that Voxis felt something crack inside his chest. When was the last time anyone had shared food with him? When had anyone shown him kindness without expecting something in return? Dragons don't typically consume human sustenance," he said carefully. "Oh." Tommy looked disappointed but not offended. "What do you eat?" "Fear," Voxis admitted before he could stop himself. To his amazement, Tommy's expression brightened with curiosity rather than horror. "Like, actual fear? How does that work? Does it taste good?" For the next 20 minutes, Voxis found himself explaining the intricacies of emotional energy harvesting to the most attentive audience he'd ever had. Tommy asked thoughtful questions, made interested noises at all the right moments, and showed genuine fascination with concepts that would send most adults running for the hills. "So you're like, a fear farmer?" Tommy concluded. "I suppose that's one way to put it," Voxis said, amused despite himself. The school bell rang, signaling the end of lunch period. Tommy jumped up, shouldering his backpack. "Will you come back tomorrow?" he asked hopefully. "I want to hear more about the other dimensions." Voxis watched the boy run toward the school building, calling out a cheerful goodbye over his shoulder. The dragon sat there long after Tommy disappeared, wrestling with emotions he'd never experienced before. For the first time in his career, he completely forgot to activate his fear collection apparatus. A choice to make. That evening, Voxis received an urgent transmission from his supervisor. Gensha's three-eyed visage materialized in the warehouse, his expression as pleasant as a supernova. "Voxis," the supervisor's voice dripped with false concern. "I've been reviewing your collection data. Your numbers haven't improved. In fact, they've gotten worse." The dragon's scales rippled with nervous energy. "I've encountered some unusual resistance, sir. But I'm developing new strategies." "Enough." Gensha's middle eye fixed on him with predatory focus. "I'm assigning Agent Scoreth to assist you. He arrives tomorrow. If your quota isn't met within 72 hours, you'll be transferred to Flora Division permanently." The transmission ended, leaving Voxis in darkness. Scoreth, he knew that name. A brutal, efficient fear harvester who showed no mercy to humans, especially children. The thought of Scoreth encountering Tommy made something violent twist in his stomach. The next day, Voxis arrived at the school early, his massive form tense with anxiety. When Tommy appeared with his usual bright smile and boundless energy, the dragon felt a fierce protectiveness surge through him. "You're back!" Tommy exclaimed, running over with a drawing clutched in his small hands. "I made this for you." The crude crayon illustration showed a black dragon with purple wings flying through a starry sky, with a small figure riding on its back. At the bottom, in shaky letters, Tommy had written, "Voxis my friend." For a moment, Voxis couldn't speak. No one had ever drawn him a picture before. No one had ever called him friend. "I thought maybe you could take me flying sometime," Tommy said hopefully. "I promise I'd hold on tight." Before Voxis could respond, the air shimmered, and another dragon materialized, smaller than Voxis but radiating cold malevolence. Scoritha's crimson scales gleamed like fresh blood, and his yellow eyes immediately locked onto Tommy. "So this is the resistant subject," Scorith hissed, his voice like breaking glass. "One small human causing all this trouble. How pathetic." Tommy, to his credit, didn't run. But for the first time since Voxis had met him, the boy took a step backward, instinctively sensing danger. "Scorith," Voxis said carefully, positioning himself slightly between the other dragon and Tommy. "I wasn't expecting you so soon." Clearly. Scoritha's gaze never left the child. "Let me demonstrate proper technique." The red dragon began to shift, his form becoming more monstrous, more wrong. His fear-harvesting apparatus hummed to life with predatory hunger. Tommy's eyes widened, and Voxis could smell the first tendrils of genuine terror beginning to emanate from the boy. "Stop," Voxis said. Scorith paused. "Excuse me." "I said stop." Voxis moved fully in front of Tommy, his wings spreading protectively. "The child is under my jurisdiction." "Your jurisdiction?" Scorith laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "You've failed, Voxis. Your quota is still unmet. Stand aside." Voxis felt Tommy's small hand touch his scaled leg, trusting him for protection. In that moment, everything became crystal clear. His quota, his career, his standing in the Corps, none of it mattered compared to the trust of this one small human. "No," he said simply. Scoritha's eyes blazed with fury. "You're refusing a direct order. You know what that means." Voxis did know. Insubordination meant exile, stripping of rank, banishment to the void between dimensions. But looking down at Tommy's upturned face, frightened now, but still trusting, he found he didn't care. "I know exactly what it means," Voxis said, power beginning to build in his chest. "And I'm telling you to leave. Now." The two dragons faced each other across the playground, centuries of training and instinct warring with something entirely new, something that felt suspiciously like love. Tommy squeezed Voxis's leg tighter. "Are you really my friend?" he whispered. Voxis looked down at the boy, then back at Scoritha's threatening posture. For the first time in his long existence, he knew exactly who he was meant to be. "Yes," he said firmly. "I am." The dragon's new purpose. What followed was the briefest dragon fight in galactic history. Scorith lunged forward, claws extended, only to meet Voxis's full fury. 8 centuries of suppressed frustration, combined with desperate protectiveness, erupted in a display of raw power that sent the red dragon tumbling across 3 city blocks. When Scorith finally picked himself up from the wreckage of a convenience store, he took one look at Voxis's blazing eyes and decided that Flora Division was looking better by the minute. "This isn't over," Scorith snarled, activating his emergency recall beacon. "The Corps will hear about this." "I'm counting on it," Voxis replied calmly. As Scorith vanished in a swirl of interdimensional energy, Voxis turned back to Tommy, who was staring at him with undisguised awe. "That was amazing," the boy shouted. "You're like a superhero." Before Voxis could respond, his communication device chimed with an incoming transmission. Gensha's furious face appeared, all 3 eyes practically glowing with rage. "Voxis. You've assaulted a fellow agent. You've abandoned your post. You've—" "I quit," Voxis said simply, and destroyed the communication device with a casual flick of his claw. Tommy looked up at him with concern. "Are you in trouble because of me?" Voxis considered this carefully. By Corps standards, he was in the worst possible trouble. Exile, disgrace, and an eternity of wandering the void awaited him. But looking at Tommy's earnest face, he felt lighter than he had in centuries. "No," he said finally. "I'm free because of you." Over the following weeks, Voxis discovered what it meant to have a purpose beyond quotas and performance reviews. He became Tommy's secret guardian, invisible to adult eyes but always present. He scared away bullies with strategic growls, helped with homework by providing dramatically narrated historical accounts from his personal experience, and served as the universe's most overqualified imaginary friend. The other children at school began to notice Tommy's confidence growing. His drawings became more elaborate, his stories more creative, his smile more radiant. When asked about his secret, Tommy would just grin and say he had a friend who showed him that the universe was full of wonders. Months later, as Voxis watched Tommy play with his human friends, he reflected on how completely his life had changed. He no longer harvested fear, instead, he had learned to cultivate something far more powerful, hope. His scales had taken on a subtle iridescent quality, and the constant ache of quota pressure had been replaced by a warm contentment he'd never experienced. He'd found something the Galactic Intimidation Corps couldn't quantify or harvest: genuine friendship. Tommy ran over to where Voxis sat invisible in the shade of a large oak tree. "What adventure should we have today?" the boy asked, his eyes sparkling with mischief. Voxis materialized just enough for Tommy to see him, his massive form somehow gentle despite its intimidating appearance. "What did you have in mind, small friend?" "I want to see the realm with the cold fire sky," Tommy said. "The one you told me about." Voxis felt a surge of pride. In all his centuries of existence, no one had ever wanted to visit his home. "Are you certain? It's quite different from Earth. That's what makes it an adventure." Tommy laughed, the sound as bright as starlight. As Voxis carefully lifted his young friend onto his back, preparing for their first interdimensional journey together, he realized that Tommy had been right from the very beginning. The universe truly was full of wonders, you just had to be brave enough to see them. And sometimes, the most terrifying monsters were simply beings who had forgotten how to be anything else. High above Meadowvale, a dragon and a child soared toward the sunset, both of them discovering that the greatest magic in any dimension is the simple power of friendship. From his home realm, Voxis could already hear the whispers of other creatures, dragons, shadow beings, and nightmare entities, who had grown tired of being feared and longed for something more. Word was spreading through the interdimensional community about the dragon who had found a better way. Perhaps the Galactic Intimidation Corps would soon have competition from an entirely different kind of organization. One that specialized not in harvesting fear, but in nurturing wonder. After all, Tommy had taught him that the universe was always ready for a little more magic. The end.